Hi, and welcome to this session about what's new in designing generative AI experiences for Business Central. I'm Jakob Winter, I'm the design manager for Business Central, and I'm here today with my colleague, Søren Alexandersen.
Thank you, Jakob. Welcome to this session. Let's just dive right in. First of all, let's set the scene. AI is here to stay, and it's bringing more transformation than most of us have seen in our lifetime. And in regards to designing business applications and software, there's a balancing act, because all these great opportunities and innovation also means transformation, it means change and disruption. But on the human side, we don't like that. We like habits, we like predictability, and we have expectations for how features should work. And we take comfort that they work today the same way as they did yesterday. So that's what this session is all about. How can we make those two ends meet? How can you and we design features that bring innovation, that make you and your customers more productive, but without disrupting? So today we're going to talk about the design elements and UX framework for making these features consistent and seamless and intuitive. And with that, Jakob, can you tell us a bit more about AI in sort of a Microsoft context and what we mean when we say interact with software a new way?
I can. Thanks a lot, Søren. So AI has been hard to miss in the technology landscape the last year. And the Microsoft take on AI is using the name Copilot to describe the way that the human and the computer can work together when AI is in play. And the term Copilot is meant to signify that the computer is not taking control, the computer is working with the human user to solve the task. And that distinction, that way of placing the AI in relation to what the human does, is key for how we are integrating AI into Business Central as well. So Copilot is a term, and it can be a bit hard in the beginning to really frame or define what Copilot is. And that is partly because it can take many forms in how users are using a computer with AI going forward. So in one way, it's a conversation. You've seen the chat interfaces. In other situations, it operates more like you would expect an AI assistant to do, an agent, and so on. So we are using this story that you might know from old times, where we have a group of people who are meeting an elephant, and they are all blindfolded, so they can't see what they're observing or what they're experiencing. For that reason, they describe this new thing that they don't know in very many different ways. But in reality, it's the same elephant that they're touching. So in this session, we will try to get a little more concrete around what is this elephant, if you will, and how are users going to experience it in Business Central and other Microsoft software. So the agenda for the session here is Søren will explain in a moment about AI inputs and outputs. We will talk about the concrete ways where the human and computer work together to solve the task, and that's framed as a human-in-the-loop way of doing things. Then we are going to be more practical. We are going to look at the prompt dialog in all its different facets, which is an important part of the toolkit in Business Central. And lastly, we will give you a lot of guidelines and links for where you can continue your path into AI with Business Central. So over to you, Søren, inputs and outputs for AI.
Let's talk about the AI inputs and outputs. And to kick this off, let's start with a small demo. So here, in this example, I'm on a sales order, and I want to suggest sales lines with Copilot. So I hit the action, suggest sales lines. Here I have a free text input. So here I can describe anything I want. So let me say I want the Colombia beans, 5 pieces. And now Copilot will generate and interpret my request. And let's see if it could come up with what I expect it to. So this part you see now is the second mode of the Copilot, the prompt dialog. And now I see that Copilot produced an output for me, and it's exactly what I wanted. In this case, you'll notice that the output is structured. It's structured into the fields that I want. For example, the quantity field and the item number in this case. That's great. This was just to show you one example where we started with unstructured data in terms of free text and ended with structured data in terms of data in controls with field value. So let's talk about this with inputs. So as we saw, we had an example with unstructured input, which is free text. And this is also what you know from various chat experiences. You can chat and write anything you like. There's also the structured inputs, which we'll get back to a demo of later, where you have every input in terms of a field or multiple fields and some settings. And then you have a mix of these two, which is semi-structured. You have some free text, but you also have some options that you can select, which helps give input to the underlying prompt. Now, if we look at the outputs, it's kind of the same thing. You have outputs that are free text, and that's not necessarily correlated with what type of inputs it was. You can have structured input and unstructured output, or vice versa. And then you also have the structured output that we just saw in the demo before, where you have controls and fields that are filled with some values, and you can have anything in between those two. If we take a closer look at the prompt dialog, it has three stages. It has the input mode, it has the generating mode, and it has the output mode. And as we've said a couple of times now, input can be structured, semi-structured, or unstructured. And the same goes for the output mode. And it's up to you to consider what fits best for your scenario, for the feature you want to build. Do I have structured data? Do I have unstructured data? Because with unstructured data, there's also a bit more uncertainty as to whether Copilot will interpret the input correctly, because you could write anything. So consider really if there's an opportunity to save a few clicks by using structured data if you have it. Now, what we see here on screen now is an example of structured data for the marketing text feature. We have most of the data here already. You have the name of the item, you have the item attributes. All of these things make up all the input that we need, combined with the options below where we can set the tone and format and emphasis, which is enough for us to feed the prompt. So what happens in reality is that you can actually, in this case, even skip, if you wanted to, in some cases, skip the input mode. That's up to you to decide for each of your features. Now, you have control over this input section. Think of it as a place where you can add page parts and design what kind of elements do you want to have here. What is it that the user should be able to select from, if not free text? What kind of fields do they want to manipulate in order to feed the prompt with input? Then, as we enter the generating mode, this is really where Copilot does its magic and interprets the prompt and tries to produce a meaningful output. Then we enter the output mode, and in this example here on screen, this is unstructured data. This is free text as the marketing text. And on this screen, you have the opportunity to manipulate the output in various ways. Again, you take control over this output space, whether or not you want to show like the output as unstructured data as here, or if you want to show it as structured with field values as we saw in the demo with the sales line suggestions as before. You have various options to do things on this page. One is to carousel between the versions of output. So if you've iterated through this, let's say the generation mode, you have the option to cycle through the outputs to select the one that you think was the best match for your scenario. And you also have the option to go back to the input prompt by clicking the title of the page here. That will take you back to the input mode, basically. Also, here at the bottom of the output page, you have the option to regenerate the AI output Simply just retry and see what does it come up with if you run it again. You could, of course, also discard the output if you just want to, go back to scratch. So even before you start the feature, this will close the prompt dialog. And of course, you can accept it if you find it useful. And here you have the option to decide what kind of options should be there for applying different variations of input so that you get a different output. In this case of the marketing text feature, you have tone and format and emphasis. So with that, let's just go and see another demo where we start with structured data and end also with structured data. So here I'm on a purchase order, and I have an opportunity now to use Copilot to map the lines from the e-document that was matched to this purchase order with the lines from this purchase order. So I hit the map e-document action. And what we see here is that we actually skip the input mode because we had all the input we needed. No need to drag the user through an input stage. So we could go directly to the generating mode and then after that directly to the output mode. And you see here that based on the inputs, we were able to create some structured outputs. In this case, we matched purchase order lines using Copilot. So this was just an example of we came from some structured input, no need to involve the user in the input stage. We skip that part, go directly to generating, and then to the output. So it's a good thing for you to consider your scenario. Do I have structured data or not? Do I need to involve the user? Is there anything that they can decide in that input process in terms of things that will impact the output? Here, it's much structured, no need to involve the user. After seeing these demos, Jakob, can you take us through the more general concepts with AI experiences in businesses and make us wiser on that?
Thanks, Søren. Great demos. And as you mentioned, we will take now a more high-level view on the AI experiences and how to design for them. And if you want to dive into the demos that Søren showed in more detail, there are other sessions in the launch event here that you can click into. But let's zoom out a moment and talk about AI experiences, because as compelling these scenarios are, it is a novel type of experience, and we have found in our research that it takes a little getting used to, both for people working with this and designing for it. So having what we call new mental models for AI is important. And part of that is understanding what can AI do, what is it good for, and what is still sort of primarily the human's problem-solving skills required. And what we have found when we have interviewed business users is that, of course, they are experts in their domain of business, and they are very knowledgeable about what they do and why. But most business users are not AI experts. It's not necessarily clear what AI is best for at this point in time. And lastly, building trust using AI requires that the users are comfortable with the limitations of AI and really diving into the AI advantages require that trust to be in place. So how can we support that trust? And that's something that we have spent a good deal of time on, understanding how can AI be integrated so that it supports business users in a great way. So I'm listing here some of the many tasks that AI can support users in. And again, following the news and the hype around AI, these are just a glimpse of what people have proposed as great ways to support users with AI. Simplify solving tasks, get quicker insights, understand relationships, and so on. So a very broad palette of ways that AI can help the business users. But we can also bucket these in a way and see, well, at the end of the day, maybe this is about two things primarily. AI can help taking action to do something more faster or more efficient, and AI can help gain insights, get to knowledge around the domain of business in ways that haven't been possible before as easily. So let's look at the action part here. the user expresses a desire, has an intention. You saw Søren, instead of manually filling in the sales line, he just typed what items he wanted, and AI was quickly able to pull those lines and create them into the sales order. Of course, with one line, the gain is maybe not so great, but you can easily imagine scenarios where you want to fill in 20 or 25 lines. Anything that can speed up that process is going to help greatly. Next up, getting insights, knowing when to do what, knowing what you need to know to be proactive in your business is also a great potential of AI now and especially going forward. So how does AI know what to suggest, what to take action about? And again, a glimpse into some of the data context that is available for an AI engine such as Copilot are mentioned here. So in Business Central knows what page is on the screen at a given point in time. So it knows what the user is looking at in Business Central. It knows what the user have been doing in Business Central in terms of what orders has been touched, created, and so on. Copilot also has access to data, and it knows what the user is job roles are typically, and it knows how data is changing, so what is trending. So all these data sources are potentially input to Copilot in terms of suggesting and helping the user be productive. Now, we also need to talk about the situation where things can go wrong, because there are, as you've also I'm sure heard about, is that AI is not necessarily making the right guesses or predictions all the time. So you can get ungrounded information from AI, and this is just a fact of how AI works now and probably also going forward. So the wisdom here is that instead of trying to rule out all wrongdoings of AI, we need to bracket it, we need to control, we need to understand and put up safeguards, because AI will always be failing from time to time. So the research here that I'm quoting is that no AI will be ever perfect, because no model can interact with the physical world in a complete way. So human needs to be in the loop, as it's said, to control and understand what AI is doing, so we can get the benefits without the risk. So how do we do that? Well, how to manage generative AI risks? So there, again, back to the previous point, there are two ways we need to manage risk. There is what we can call detrimental actions. AI may suggest actions which are undesirable. So taking a very simple example, it could have picked the wrong item when Søren asked for a certain item. It could have found another item for him. So that is obviously undesirable, but with very little side effects. However, we need to deal with these situations. There's also what we, under one, call the ungrounded reasoning, meaning that the AI is suggesting an insight that happens to be incorrect. And it can be incorrect for a number of different ways that we won't go into here, but we will talk more about how we deal with these situations. In terms of actions, the main point around dealing with action is that we need to provide users a way to either undo or preview what the AI is suggesting of an action. So now we are talking about what we call the responsible AI principles. And a very important principle is that the system, in this case Business Central, must always provide a preview or a way to completely undo what AI suggested. The second mantra is that when Business Central is showing some generated information or insight, we will always mark that information and, when possible, attach a confidence level to the information. So the user is informed that this piece of information is generated by AI, and secondly, in situations where it's possible, provide a confidence level for that piece of information. So let's look at how this plays out in practice. So you just saw Søren's example with a sales order. And what he did here was he had a start situation that was a document, and he asked for some lines to be added. And AI generated those lines and came with a preview of the suggested lines in what we call the prompt dialog, that we will talk more about in a minute. The user can, in this particular case, choose to keep it. And when the user keeps it, those lines are added to the sales order. So if the user had pressed the discard button, then those lines would be discarded and the user would be back at the sales order without any lines added. So in summary, responsible AI means provide a preview or undo, and when the user decides to undo, discard what the user generated. So a lot of the interaction and experience around Business Central revolves around the prompt dialog. So in this next section, we will talk a bit about the prompt dialog and how to design it and the features it has at the moment. Let me add that in terms of Copilot experiences, I'm sure a lot of you might be looking for information about how to extend chat, the Copilot chat in Business Central. That is not part of this session, and currently there is no partner extensibility for the chat in Business Central. What is the main vehicle for AI experiences in Business Central at the moment is the prompt dialog. So that is exactly what we will go through next. So as Søren mentioned, and in the demo around the e-documents and the matching of sales lines, Søren mentioned that the prompt input, the instruction to the generation step, is actually optional. And that means that very often the context for what AI is going to generate is already present in Business Central. In the case with matching lines, those lines have already been added on the e-document and on the purchase orders. So it's all a matter of matching up the lines. And since that should happen according to a fairly well-defined set of rules, there's no need to let the user provide any prompt input for that particular operation. We can just go straight to the generation step. So the next step, the generation step, is certainly a required step. The generate step is where the large language model is contacted and it is coming back with some data that is then bound into Business Central in a way that matching the scenario, and the content output is shown to the user. So in the content output stage, that is where the user will review what has been generated, and they will decide to either keep or discard that particular input. If the user presses keep it, of course, we are moving data from the temporary table, usually where it's stored, to the actual table where that data will be persisted. So how does that look at the AL layer? This is not a developer or engineering session, but we will just touch briefly on the AL structures because it's useful to know at the conceptual basis what is a prompt dialog actually containing. And the prompt dialog is going to be with us from now and going forward, and it will complement the other page types we have in Business Central, such as standard dialog, confirmation dialog, cards and page documents, and so on. So this is a new page type that has been developed for Business Central exactly to encapsulate and hold these experiences related to AI. So the page type, as it says here, is prompt dialog, and what it has is a few sets of new areas. So those of you who are knowing AL will notice that the prompt area and the prompt options area are also new areas in a page. The content area has been there all the time, and it's also used with other page types. So this is where, concretely, to Søren's explanation, the input is defined in the prompt part. So it can be free text for the unstructured input. It can be a list, or it can be a control of some sort if it's related to a structured input. The prompt options section is where you are putting fields that are, you could say, parameters to the prompt. So you could choose how, for example, the tone of voice or the length or some common ways of adjusting the output can go there as prompt options. These will have to be option fields, so no other data types than option fields are allowed in the prompt options. Let me say here that the user can use prompt options, but it's a good practice never to require the user to choose the prompt options. What can be required is the prompt, but the prompt options should never be required. And we have found in our research that actually sometimes users don't even notice that there are options. So it's a good practice not to assume that the user is going to tweak the options in a given case. Simply use a good default so it doesn't matter too much if the user don't know it, they can just go back and maybe discover it later. Next up in the prompt dialog is the system actions. So most importantly, the generate system action is the code that will be run when the user hits generate in the prompt dialog. And maybe needless to say, the system action OK and cancel will be called when the user either decides to discard or keep the output. So for the AL developer, they are responsible for providing the AL code that make these system actions actually provide the experience that the user is expecting. And what are they expecting? Well, it may be redundant, but let me just state it again. It's very, very important that when you are developing a new prompt dialog, that you obey to this principle of undoing so that the user can safely generate something in AI, regret and hit discard, and then all traces of that needs to go away. So it's a good practice not to put any data from the generated output anywhere but in the temporary table supporting the prompt dialog, because that's really the only way that you can secure that the user can discard and things are gone. So don't make any side effects of the generated output, because that way you are not allowing the user to roll back. Continuing on the prompt dialog, the next thing you saw also in Søren's example was that there is a small instructional text that the user can, that helps the user understand what kind of prompt is expected in this situation. So in this particular case, it was describe the lines you'd like to create, and Copilot will get you started. That is what we call, sometimes it's called the ghost text or the placeholder text, whatever you call it. Its purpose is to give an instruction to the user about what they should type here. Next feature of the prompt dialog is known as the prompt guide. There was an example in Søren's demo right away, but you have probably seen the principles in other Microsoft programs. The icon here, sometimes also called the spell book, will allow the user to get access to some suggestions for what they can use of prompt. So they simply pick from a menu. Maybe you group the prompts like these are related to copying, these are related to adding, and so on. And then for each group, there will be relevant prompt so the user can get a jump start on their own prompting. And we have done that because prompting is not going to feel natural to every user. So this is an important way of giving them some templates to work from when they formulate their own prompts. All right. Now, let's say you've built the prompt dialogues and now you want to allow the user to trigger those prompt dialogues from your application. So what I'll explain here are the few of the options that are now available to place prompt actions that will trigger prompt dialogues into the Business Central UI. So most prominently, we have actually placed it front and center of all list places. So there's now a thing called the Copilot menu that is available to prompt actions on every list. It is even possible now to have the Copilot menu be a element that is sort of overlaid on the page for maximum discoverability. So this will let you put prompt actions in a very prominent place so that users can easily get started on invoking your great Copilot actions. When the menu is called up, it will show all the Copilot actions defined in that page. And you will also notice that some of those prompt actions are defined by the app, others are defined by the system. So also explained in another launch session here are the analysis assist. Analysis assist is a prompt action that is defined by the system and also available on all list pages. The menu inside the page has the same choices as the action bar, plus one. As you can see here, the lower one is called hide. For those users who don't feel they want a floating Copilot menu, they can decide to hide that, and then it is only available in the action bar. The floating Copilot menu is clever because it allows one-click access to the topmost action of those in the page here. So you can see how in this particular case, reconcile gets a very, very prominent positioning for that page, and the user is likely to discover that as one of the first things when they get into the list. So use that space wisely for an action that actually is supposed to be very prominent. So we are making good use of that prominence. Next up, in terms of prompt actions, are the dialog. The standard dialog also has a capability of providing a prompt action. So that's a very brilliant way of having a Copilot actions appearing in the context of a dialogue. And you've probably seen in relation to the marketing text feature that that particular action is available when you are writing a marketing text. We are getting to the few last slides around prompt dialogues and actions. We don't have any Copilot menu on the entity pages yet. So cards and documents don't have that capability that lists have yet. But the subpages have. So you can put a Copilot action into a subpage, and that is exactly what we were using in the demo Søren showed, where the suggest sales lines has been put. And in situations where you want the user to be able to discover the prompt actions, you can either use the menu with the Copilot icon, or you can use the existing action bar and place your actions there. And we recommend this so-called sparkle action to represent those actions that trigger some kind of AI. All right, over to you, Søren, about the prompt dialog.
Thank you so much, Jakob. This was really great insight about how to structure and how to use the prompt dialog. So call to action for you is now to get familiar with the prompt dialog, spin up a trial of Business Central and start playing around with it. Also try out these features in AL and start building your first AI features. But importantly, as you've now seen throughout this session, is consider the best use of the prompt dialog for every scenario, meaning what type of input do you have? What kind of output do you expect to produce with it? Structured versus unstructured, or in between. So one way to get started is to grab a demo environment from what we call CDX, which is the partner demo space where you can sign in with your partner account and get a tenant. We suggest that you add a new profile in Microsoft Edge that allows you to store the credentials for this demo environment so you have easy access to that. And then sign up for a Business Central trial on that environment. If you can't find Copilot, here are some things that you can check. So first of all, you can check the Copilot and AI capabilities page. You could simply just search for that in the Tell Me search. Check that and make sure that the features are active here. And there are some other things you see here that you can check. For example, right now we only support English language, so make sure that English is selected as your language. And also, this is from what we call version 24, meaning 2024 wave 1. There are some other great launch event sessions that you should check out that goes into more details with some of the demos we've just seen. So for example, these 2 demos with creating sales line suggestions with Copilot and e-invoice matching with Copilot. Check those sessions out. They go into much more detail about how these features work and to which extent you can use them. Also, what Jakob mentioned, there's the AI-powered analysis with Copilot. That's a great session as well. We will show you how to use the analysis mode and generate analysis tabs with Copilot by describing what you want to see. And there's, of course, a more technical session that is extending Copilot using AL code that will go into more details with what Jakob just showed in terms of how to structure your AL code and make it best in class for creating Copilot features. There's also a lot of great content out there already. So take a screenshot of this screen here. I won't go through all of them, but here you can get access to all the information, both technical and non-technical, so that you can have discussions in your teams about what kind of Copilot features do we want to build for our customers. And on top of that, on the more general resources for Business Central, here's also a lot of great stuff for you. If I should point to just one of these, is the bottom one that says aka.ms/bcall, that basically links to all the rest. So if you internalize just one source from this, it's that one. So with that, we would like to thank you for watching this Business Central launch event session and hope to see you again.